Step out of the vehicle. Now.
Deputy, I am a federal agent. You need to stop and call a supervisor.
I don't care who you think you are. Hands behind your back!
You are crossing a line that will end your career.
Elias first noticed the aggressive glare of LED lights in his rearview mirror at approximately 8:45 p.m. He was in the middle lane, moving with the flow of traffic at 65 miles per hour. He checked his speedometer instinctively. He checked his mirrors. He was driving with the precision of a man who knew that federal vehicles were monitored by GPS and that any deviation from traffic laws could result in administrative paperwork he didn't want to do. When the siren chirped a short, aggressive burst of sound, Elias did exactly what the law required. He engaged his turn signal, waited for a safe opening in the heavy evening traffic, and slowly navigated the large SUV to the concrete shoulder under the imposing shadow of a highway overpass. The heat index was still over 100 degrees, and the air shimmered off the asphalt. The officer who stepped out of the patrol vehicle was Deputy Brock, a 27-year-old officer with the local sheriff's office. Brock had been on this force for 3 years and had developed a reputation for being a stat hunter, an officer who prioritized the number of arrests and tickets over the quality of policing. He was looking for a reason to escalate, and tonight he thought he had found one. Brock approached the passenger side of the Tahoe first, a tactic used to throw drivers off balance, but Elias was already aware of the maneuver. Elias lowered all the windows in the vehicle to demonstrate transparency and turned on the interior dome light. He placed both hands on the top of the steering wheel, fingers spread wide. This was the universal sign of, "I am not a threat," in the language of law enforcement. Brock walked around to the driver's side, his hand resting ominously on his holster. He didn't say, "Good evening." He didn't ask for license and registration. He shined a flashlight directly into Elias's eyes despite the ambient street lighting, and stood in silence for a long, uncomfortable moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was laced with hostility. "Do you know why I stopped you, Elias?" Blinking against the glare, replied calmly and respectfully. "No, Deputy, I do not. I was maintaining the speed limit and staying in my lane." Brock scoffed. "I clocked you weaving, and your window tint looks illegal. Roll it up halfway so I can test it." Elias knew this was a pretext. His tint was federal standard exempt from state laws, but he didn't argue yet. He simply stated, "Deputy, before we proceed, I need to inform you that I am a federal agent with Homeland Security. My credentials are in my jacket pocket and my weapon is on my right hip." In a professional interaction, this disclosure changes everything. It usually leads to a de-escalation, a conversation between peers, and a quick release. But for Deputy Brock, this statement was like gasoline on a fire. He saw it as a challenge to his dominance. He didn't believe it, or perhaps he didn't care. He sneered at Elias. "Yeah, and I'm the president. I told you to step out of the car." Elias paused. He knew the legal parameters perfectly. He asked Deputy, "Is this a request or a lawful order?" Brock screamed, his hand tightening on his weapon. "It is a lawful order. Get out now." Elias slowly unbuckled his seatbelt. He moved with deliberate slowness, narrating his actions. "I am unbuckling my seatbelt. I am opening the door. I am stepping out." As soon as Elias's foot touched the pavement, Brock grabbed him by the shoulder and spun him around, slamming him against the hot metal of the Tahoe's door. The impact was unnecessary and violent. Elias felt a sharp pain in his shoulder, an old injury from his time in the field, flare up. "Spread your legs!" "Wider!" Brock barked, kicking Elias's ankles apart. Elias complied, his face pressed against the window of his own car. He could see his reflection, a senior federal official being treated like a violent felon. Deputy Elias said, his voice dropping an octave into a tone of deadly seriousness. "You are making a catastrophic mistake. I am the assistant special agent in charge for this region. You need to look at my credentials before you go any further." Brock ignored him. He began a rough pat-down, jamming his hands into Elias's pockets. He found the badge case. He pulled it out, looked at the gold badge and the bold letters reading, "Homeland Security Investigations." And then he did something unthinkable. He tossed the badge onto the hood of the car as if it were a piece of trash. Fake Brock muttered, "I see these online all the time." He then found Elias's service weapon, a Sig Sauer P320. "Gun," he yelled to his partner, Deputy Miller, who had just arrived as backup. Brock ripped the gun from Elias's holster and threw it onto the pavement, scratching the slide of the government property. "You're under arrest for impersonating a peace officer, unlawful carrying of a weapon, and resisting arrest," Brock announced, wrenching Elias's arms behind his back. The handcuffs went on tight, punishingly tight. Elias felt the metal ratchets click down onto his wrist bones. He didn't struggle. He didn't yell. He knew that any physical resistance would give them the justification they needed to use a taser or worse. He simply stated loud enough for the body cameras to pick up, "I am a federal agent. I am unlawfully being detained. I demand a supervisor immediately." Brock laughed. "You can tell it to the judge." He shoved Elias toward the patrol car. The heat was oppressive. Sweat was running down Elias's back. He was placed in the back of the cruiser, a cramped cage of hard plastic and metal mesh. The air conditioning was barely working. Elias sat there, his shoulders aching, his wrists throbbing, watching through the plexiglass as Deputy Brock and Deputy Miller approached his vehicle. This is where the violation of rights transitioned into a federal crime. Deputy Miller, a younger officer who seemed hesitant but was following Brock's lead, opened the rear door of the Tahoe. Elias shouted from the back of the cruiser, struggling to be heard through the glass, "Do not enter that vehicle. That is a federal government vehicle containing classified national security documents. You do not have a warrant, and you do not have consent." Brock looked back at the cruiser and raised a middle finger. He then dove into the car. They began to tear it apart. They pulled out gym bags. They opened the glove box and dumped the contents on the floor. Then they reached the cargo area. Bolted to the floor was a heavy steel lockbox marked with red tape, "Evidence. Do not open. Department of Homeland Security." Inside that box were encrypted hard drives seized from the port raid earlier that day, containing the identities of undercover assets and the financial records of a major cartel. Brock saw the lockbox and his eyes lit up. He assumed it was drugs or money. He went back to his patrol car and grabbed a crowbar. Elias watched in horror. He slammed his body against the door of the cruiser. "Stop! That is classified evidence. You are committing a felony." Brock ignored him. He wedged the crowbar into the seam of the lockbox and began to pry. The metal screeched. He popped the lock. He opened the lid. Inside, he didn't find stacks of cash. He found anti-static bags containing hard drives and a thick file folder stamped "Top Secret." Brock paused. He picked up the folder. He opened it. He began to read names of people who would be killed if their identities were leaked. At this moment, Deputy Miller looked at the file, saw the federal seals, saw the classification markings, and his face went white. Brock Miller whispered, "I think this is real. We need to stop." Brock waved him off, though he looked less confident now. "He's just a mule. He made these fake documents to fool us." While this illegal search was destroying the chain of custody for a major federal case, the world outside was watching. Traffic had slowed to a crawl. On the overpass above, pedestrians had stopped. In the lane next to the shoulder, a truck driver had pulled over and was live streaming the entire event on Facebook. He had a clear view of the officers prying open the box and the man in the suit handcuffed in the car. The video was already garnering thousands of views. The title of the stream was "Corrupt Cops Robbing a Suit in Houston." Inside the cruiser, Elias had gone into survival mode. He closed his eyes and began to memorize details. He memorized the time. He memorized the badge numbers he had seen. He memorized the specific sequence of the search. After 45 minutes of being detained in the sweltering car, a supervisor finally arrived. Lieutenant Harris was an older, seasoned officer who carried himself with weary authority. He pulled up behind the other cruisers and walked slowly toward Brock. "What's the situation here?" Harris asked, wiping sweat from his forehead. Brock puffed out his chest. "Got a big one, Lou. Impersonating a Fed. illegal weapon, and we found a bunch of fake documents in a lockbox. Harris looked at the Tahoe. He recognized the specific antenna array on the roof. He recognized the government plates, which Brock had apparently ignored. He walked over to the fake badge lying on the hood of the car. He picked it up. He felt the weight of it. He looked at the holographic security features. He looked at the ID card. Harris felt a cold knot form in his stomach. He walked over to the lockbox and saw the broken lock and the top secret folders exposed to the open air. He slammed the lid shut immediately. He turned to Brock, his voice a low, dangerous growl. "You pried open a federal lockbox." Brock started to stammer. "Well, yeah, probable cause he was." Harris cut him off. "Shut up. Stand there and do not move." Harris walked to the patrol car and opened the rear door. He looked at Elias. Elias looked back, his eyes cold and unforgiving. Lieutenant Elias said, his voice calm but terrifying. "My name is Elias Vance. I am the ASAC for HSI. Your deputies have just compromised a Level 1 national security investigation, destroyed federal property, and illegally detained a senior federal agent. You have exactly 30 seconds to get these handcuffs off me before I make a phone call that will bring the FBI, the DOJ, and the U.S. Marshals down on this highway." Harris didn't hesitate. He pulled out his key and unlocked the cuffs. He helped Elias out of the car. "I am so sorry, Agent Vance. I don't even know what to say." Elias didn't want an apology. He wanted justice. He rubbed his wrists, which were bleeding where the metal had dug in. He walked over to his Tahoe. He inspected the damage to the lockbox. He inspected the scratched slide of his weapon. He looked at Brock, who was now standing by the guardrail, looking like a child who had just realized he broke a priceless vase. Elias took out his phone. He photographed everything: the damage, the badge numbers, the face of Deputy Brock. Then he made a call. He didn't call his wife. He called the United States Attorney for the Southern District of Texas. He put the phone on speaker so Lieutenant Harris could hear. "Sir, this is Vance. We have a situation. Local law enforcement has compromised the evidence from the port raid. I need an FBI evidence response team at my location immediately to establish chain of custody, and I need a Civil Rights Division prosecutor on the line." The next 2 hours were a blur of flashing lights. FBI agents arrived to secure the compromised hard drives. Internal Affairs for the Sheriff's Department arrived to take Brock's gun and badge. Elias was treated by EMTs for nerve damage in his wrists and a torn rotator cuff in his shoulder. He refused to go home. He went straight to the federal building to document the incident while it was fresh. The damage to the case was severe, because the chain of custody had been broken by Brock's illegal search defense attorneys for the cartel would later argue that the evidence could have been planted or tampered with. Years of work were jeopardized by one deputy's ego. Elias filed a federal lawsuit the following week. He sued Deputy Brock individually, the Sheriff's Department, and the county. The lawsuit alleged violations of the Fourth Amendment unreasonable search and seizure, the 14th Amendment due process, and raised claims of assault battery and false imprisonment. He hired a high-profile civil rights attorney, Marcus Sterling, known for tearing apart qualified immunity defenses. The county's response was predictable. They claimed Deputy Brock had qualified immunity, a legal doctrine that protects government officials from liability unless they violate clearly established rights. They argued that Brock made an honest mistake and couldn't have known the badge was real. But the video evidence was overwhelming. The truck driver's live stream had been saved and provided to Elias's legal team. It clearly showed Brock mocking the badge without checking it. It showed him prying open a box marked Federal Evidence. It showed the malice. The discovery phase of the trial unearthed Brock's personnel file. It was a disaster. 5 previous complaints for excessive force, 2 suspensions for insubordination, and a text message thread from that very night sent to his girlfriend saying, "About to ruin this guy in a suit's night. He thinks he's special." That text message was the smoking gun. It proved malice. It proved this wasn't a mistake. It was a targeted attack. The federal judge presiding over the case, Judge Reynolds, issued a blistering ruling denying qualified immunity. He wrote, "No reasonable officer could possibly believe that prying open a marked evidence container during a traffic stop for window tint was a constitutional act. The defendant's actions display a staggering level of incompetence and arrogance that strips him of any protection under the law." The case proceeded to a jury trial in downtown Houston. The courtroom was packed. Law enforcement officers from various agencies attended, many supporting Elias, tired of seeing their profession tarnished by bad actors like Brock. Elias took the stand. He testified not just about the physical pain, but about the professional devastation. He explained how the breach of the evidence box forced the DOJ to offer plea deals to cartel members because the evidence was tainted. He spoke about the humiliation of being treated like a criminal after dedicating his life to the law. The jury listened intently. Then came the cross-examination of Deputy Brock. Under pressure, Brock crumbled. He admitted he didn't know the federal tint laws. He admitted he was angry that Elias wasn't submissive enough. He admitted he wanted to take him down a peg. The jury deliberated for 2 days. When they returned, the verdict was unanimous. They found in favor of Elias Vance on all counts. They awarded him $1.5 million in compensatory damages for the injuries and emotional distress. But the real shock came with the punitive damages, money designed to punish the wrongdoer. The jury awarded an additional $2 million in punitive damages against the county for their failure to train and supervise Brock, bringing the total verdict to $3.5 million. It was one of the largest individual settlements for a traffic stop violation in Texas history. The aftermath was swift and severe. Deputy Brock was fired and later indicted on federal charges for deprivation of rights under color of law. He eventually pleaded guilty and served 18 months in federal prison, a rare outcome that sent shockwaves through the law enforcement community. The sheriff's department was forced to overhaul its training regarding interactions with federal agents and the handling of sensitive evidence. Elias Vance eventually retired from the HSI, his shoulder injury preventing him from returning to full field duty. He used the settlement money to establish a foundation dedicated to funding legal defense for citizens who were victims of police misconduct but couldn't afford top-tier representation. Elias Vance's story became a mandatory case study at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center. It stood as a testament to the fact that no one is above the law, and that a badge is a heavy responsibility, not a crown of authority. So what is the valuable lesson we must take away for the audience? The lesson is the power of documentation and the fallacy of ego. Deputy Brock destroyed his own life because he let his ego dictate his actions. He saw a challenge where he should have seen a colleague. He acted on emotion rather than procedure. On the other hand, Elias Vance won because he relied on the ultimate weapon, the truth documented and preserved. He knew that in the heat of the moment, fighting back physically is a losing battle. The true victory is won by gathering evidence, maintaining composure, and letting the system expose the injustice. In your own life, whether you are dealing with a corrupt official, a bad boss, or a dishonest neighbor, remember this. Do not let their anger provoke you into a mistake. Be the person who takes the notes, who saves the emails, who records the truth. When you have the truth on your side and the discipline to use it correctly, you become invincible. Anger is temporary, the record is permanent. Build your record, control your emotions, and you will always come out on top.